and let it be known that this meeting's being recorded. Do we have some minutes to approve?
I took minutes last night.
Well, I think you came in late last time, so, and then, but the time before that, so I have on here 7:31, 7/6, 7:31, and the 21st.
I'll look and see.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't get around to rewriting the first 20 minutes of the notes, but according to what I have here, police and fire working together has worked well. Potential common public safety budget, but each chief manages their part of the budget. There is a classroom training room. We have a training apparatus inside the building for training, rappelling, hoses, etc. Emergency management room is used at the chief's discretion for public use. I think this was we're talking about the building that you guys visited?
Yeah.
Okay. Emergency ops would take priority. Emergency management room is used at the chief's discretion for public use. Land was gifted via negotiation, floated on a 20 to 25 year bond on the property, and they can go up to 40 years. The next section says marketing was key to getting approval. Hubbardston should examine a more similar town than Holden as they pass Prop 2.5 overrides, and that doesn't happen here. Holden took 3 tries in 5 years to get it down. Additional visits set up on the 9th at 3:30 p.m. in Paxton. Suggestion to visit Paxton first, then Ashburnham, as the latter fixed a lot of Paxton issues. Ashby took 10 years. Suggestion to look at Leicester. Suggestion to have a traffic light to allow for overflow parking at the rec field. Modular construction discussion. Chelmsford added to an existing building, saved cost as prevailing wages in New Hampshire, where it's built, are lower. Prevailing wage in Mass would be paid for installation only. The Hubbardston Fire Chief would like bunk rooms to deal with future needs and current emergency needs. Example given: blizzard, ice storm, where firefighters need to be on site. Need 2 rooms, male/female. Discussion of staffing and rooms, firefighters to population, types of houses. Rutland discussing the impact of increased housing on the fire station and how they had to repurpose rooms for new overnight use. Discussions on other towns and how they moved forward. Discussion on types of bays, drive-through versus backing in. Discussion on how other towns got grants. Suggestion that we make this plan based on how Hub managed the Main Street repavement. And asked the town administrator to retrieve history for each of the towns that did a Prop 2.5 override to get trends on successes and failures. Discussion on the next steps, set up the message, time frame defined. Discussion on existing site feasibility, understood that the site has already passed the necessary feasibility studies. Mike, not me, suggested not using the term marketing, but use inform instead. He suggests that we may be jumping ahead. Chief suggests that a doc from 2015 contains the needs assessment. Discussion to go to specific groups to present/float ideas. Many suggestions on how best to communicate. What should the feasibility study deliverables be? To be researched by Nate. Nate brought up the point of operational costs today, school, staff, etc., versus public safety building when it comes to potential overrides to fund them. Operations costs should take priority. Next meeting, review site visits, review data on override histories, review feasibility studies, need to get ARPA data, and that was it.
Is that a combined of all of the meeting minutes you have, or is that?
That's what I have.
Okay,
I didn't get to do the first 20 minutes. I didn't get to watch the video to,
so we're approving
Transcribe.
meeting minutes basically for the 7/6, 7/31,
Yep.
and,
that's all I have.
okay, so motion to approve,
I'll make the motion.
all in favor?
How about discussion?
Oh, let's have a discussion.
Yeah.
You guys have to help me a little bit, 'cause
That's
it's my
okay.
first
That's why-
rodeo here, so.
Yeah, that's all right, Kari. I think that we probably should have written minutes to take, to actually vote on, as opposed to the verbal. This came out of the training that happened about a month ago, and it said, really, you know, the video and recordings is really not appropriate. So if we could reduce the minutes to writing, then maybe we could act upon that. Might be another approach. Am I capturing that about right, Nate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you just wanna, Madam Chair, if you just wanna table the issue, I'm sure Mike
Mhm.
was reading from something, we can bring it up at the
Yeah,
next
okay,
meeting. And then,
okay.
Mike, if you just wanna jot that down, pretty much exactly what you just read, and
Hold on a sec, let me create a new one.
All right, so I can move forward at this point.
Yeah, you're the chair, you can just table that
Yeah.
issue.
And just repeat what you want me to put in here. Sorry.
Oh, that, the minutes be reduced to writing, and then we act upon the written minutes as opposed to
Verbal.
the verbal.
I will withdraw my motion.
There it is.
So as I said in my email, we have Mike Reggio, am I saying that properly, Reggio?
Yes, thank you.
Here to talk a little bit about some of their, trials and tribulations in Ashby, and how they were able to move forward with, their station. So I did a list of questions, Mike, but when you came in, you were starting to talk, I don't know if you wanna just start with, it was, 5 years, 2 committees, it might help a little bit as we
Sure.
run through some of this.
Let me start off by the current conversation about minutes. Agendas and minutes have to be posted. And what we did is, we had minutes that were drafts and sent to every committee member in advance to read. So they had it, chance to read it, and they weren't approved until the committee was in session, so, and I bring that up because if you have somebody who has nothing better to do than go and generate FOIA requests, you're gonna be thankful that you did it, because if you didn't do it, they're gonna make your life miserable, and they can, and they do.
Okay.
I don't know if you have those kind of people in town, I've got nothing better to do, but we had a couple.
Okay.
Okay, so printed agendas, obviously
48
48 hours in advance, wherever that's legally posted. And, I don't know, during COVID, we all had Zoom meetings. But before that, we had meetings in the selectman's office and people could come. So that's the importance of, published agendas. And, I'll leave that with one impression. And it is my suggestion that when you have minutes, you have a section specific for public comments. You allow them to talk when you want them to talk, not when they want to talk. Otherwise, they could interrupt you when you're doing business, making motions, deciding something. They have a right to be present, but they don't have a right to speak. You can give them the opportunity to speak as part of your agenda. We made it the last item before adjourning. So
Okay.
that's That's that perspective. I don't know where you are, you sound like you have a site,
Yeah, so just to give you a little background, this is a newly formed committee. We would go to town meetings and everybody would vote. There really wasn't a committee, so our new town administrator thought it was worthwhile to form a committee. So this is really our fourth meeting. So we've done site visits to your site, Ashburnham, Holden, Paxton, some more local to us. And the website you guys created made it easy for me to reach out to you to get contact and whatnot. And when we visited Ashby, it was nicely done, and the website's nicely done, the way your question and answers were, and we probably would encounter very similar types of things here in town, so I thought it was a great idea to have you come and kind of sit and give us some of your.
The question and answers were, on the town website, were generated by the committee and favorable people, because I'm not a Facebook fan, but they're out there.
Mhm.
And misinformation is out there, and people with agendas are out there, so that the questions and answers were trying to speak the truth, because there was many untruths out there that people wanted to lie. They actually lied, and it was tough. But we had to at least, they created a website and it was monitored, and so that's part of the thing that I encourage. So that if somebody asks a question, there's questions and answers that are on the website, so that you get a history of what questions came up and how they were answered, so that it comes from the committee, not from somebody who's got an axe to grind, who's against your project. Because who knows? I'll get ahead of myself a little bit, but I would never have guessed there would be organized opposition to our plan, and there was. But anyway.
Would you know do you have like an idea or a percentage of like what that was at the time you started versus what it became
No.
as you moved forward? Okay.
So I'll start where we started from. In 2007, the warrant article generated $38,000 for a feasibility study for a public safety building, or at least a new police station and an updated fire station. And in 2007, we had a very uncooperative fire chief who was part of the Good Old Boy Network. I don't want to offend anybody, but that's what we had. And we worked hard to try to get something, and that evolved. We hired an architect to help us do a feasibility study. So in the budget, we had needs analysis. You talked about needs, what are the needs, square footage. That's all defined by, I need a room for this and a room for that, and, all that stuff. So that was done. And we got to spend, I think, $25,000 of it, and went to town meeting thinking we were gonna ask for $3 million, and we got our head handed to us. And mainly by opposition from the fire department. That was sad, but that's the way it was. This is, change. People don't like change. And I don't know your history, but prior to this project, we never borrowed any money. I was a selectman from 95 to 2000. Couldn't get anybody to borrow money. Shouldn't be paying cash for a road grader or a fire truck, but I was a lone voice, or not in a majority. Because I think cash should be spent for other more important things, like wages and salaries for people who show up and do their job. But anyway, so the borrowing we did, so we had an architect and we failed in 2008. 2000, I don't know, it's been 5 years, so I'm not gonna pull out years, but fast forward about 5 years ago, one of the then selectmen at the time decided it was time to bring it up again. And if any of you you probably didn't see what the remnants of the previous police station was? Did you, when you went there?
No, no.
I remember it.
But they
You do?
told
The old
us.
trailer.
Yeah.
It was basically a double-wide
Yeah,
trailer, which
yeah.
were two temporary classrooms that the
Yeah.
previous police chief went as a student.
It's good.
Basically
what I have on
And it was an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Everybody who didn't have an axe to grind knew that it was an embarrassment, and it was a poor recruiting tool. How do you attract people who wanna stay? So we reached out to this guy, John, who was the architect from 2007, and we said to John, how much is it gonna cost for us to put something on paper that we can go to the voters and ask for? And what that was we went to he came up with a feasibility study for, at the time, it was $540,000 to come up with construction drawings, labor for an OPM. Does everybody know what an OPM is? So that's gonna be required, and I'll give you my bias here. It's one of the better things that Beacon Hill has done, is created the law for OPM. It was very beneficial, very beneficial, yes.
Before we go too much further, Mike, OPM means to me other people's money, so you better explain it to me.
Owner's project manager.
Okay.
Anything required.
Sure, now I understand.
But anything over $1.5 million that a town spends must hire an owner's project manager. Because the devil's in the details, and they're gonna keep you straight with prevailing wage laws, bidding laws, all of the facets to go with getting it going forward. And so that $540,000 was, I don't know, I'm gonna pull out some numbers, $250,000 for create drawings and doing feasibility, needs analysis with two chiefs, and you gotta have drawings. Nobody uses drawings, but it's electronic, but we had to put $12,000 for paper drawings, because if somebody wants a set of paper drawings, you have to provide them. We had to provide labor for this OPM to guide us. So one of the first things the committee, once we went to town meeting and got $540,000, and the voters approved of that, and I don't remember whether that was subject to 2.5 override, it might have been.
So you guys have had a 2.5 override pass before?
Oh, yes, we've had a pass, yeah, yeah.
Hubbardston has not.
What?
Hubbardston has not, and not for
Ever.
lack of trying,
Ever.
ever,
Yeah.
ever.
Well, you're gonna have to do this unless you got millions of dollars in the bank.
Nope.
Have we ever passed it for debt or capital exclusion?
Yes.
So we've passed them for debt and capital exclusions, but we haven't passed just an override of our budget. Did you guys have an override of your whole budget, or just projects that passed?
2.5 overrides have gone for specific things, and I'm trying to remember other ones. This was obviously for a public safety building.
Yeah, so, but this is stuff, right?
What?
So, when you're buying like the public safety building or a new fire engine or whatever, you're buying stuff. We've had stuff
Yeah.
pass. We haven't had the checkbook pass for our operating budget.
Well, I don't know that we have done that.
Okay.
They haven't, that's not been tried to my knowledge, because the operating budget, they know, everybody knows what the budget is. You can go up 2.5%, and you gotta wiggle through it. And everybody wants more, and you can't always give everybody more. But you have to go to town meeting with the FinCom and the selectmen agreeing. When I first came to town in 1985, you got assessors, FinCom, and selectmen arguing about the numbers, and we didn't know who to believe. So finally, people got smart and said, we're gonna go to town meeting with a balanced budget. May not be what everybody wanted, but at least if they passed it, and so overrides were other things. And I'm trying to recall what some of the but they weren't general budget items,
Okay.
okay? I mean, the budget was a budget.
So Ashby had a history in the past of buying stuff. They they would agree to buy stuff.
In general, I wanna agree with you, my
Okay.
memory is not clear about what that stuff was.
No, that's fine. Nate has access to the World Wide Web here, so we have all that answer right there for you. It'll supplement your memory, how's that?
Okay. So the $540,000 was money that we needed to start to get the ball rolling. Formed a committee, and one of the first things that the committee did was send out a request for an owner's project manager for bids, and then come in and interview for owner's project manager, because you can't select an architect until you have an owner's project manager. You've got to do that first. And the owner's project manager works for the town, just to be clear. And then we ended up using the architect from 2007, but he was with a different firm. But I mean, the architects in this business, as I hope both chiefs know, you are the chief, I'm sure.
I am,
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't want to misspeak, but anyway, they're gonna specialize in nothing but fire and police. Nothing but that, and they're good at it. They know their stuff. So that was a part of that process. And so we had already gone through a bunch of time with feasibility, needs analysis done by the architect, drawings. Originally, I thought that the building ought to be shaped differently, but I got outvoted. But be that as it may, we got what we have by concessions, by listening, and so after the 540, we went to the townspeople and said, we want $7.4 million. And that's when we found out about the organized opposition. COVID, the moderators on the front lawn of the elementary school were sitting in chairs, putting our hands through the roof to vote, sitting in our car. I mean, this is 2020, I think. I don't know the year.
Yeah.
2020.
And besides the opposition, there was some opposition from fire department personnel that I was not prepared for, and the chief told me what happened, and up until this chief came in, people were still working past 65, and that's not allowed, right?
He
So,
alluded to that.
some of the good old boys didn't like to be told that they can't be part of the fire department anymore, because they're over 65, it's a law. And they were there, you know, one of them was sitting in a car right up, obviously, he was a former officer in the police department, the fire department, and I couldn't believe there was a bunch of other ones. But anyway, most of the big opposition was people who didn't want to spend $7.5 million. And they were organized to the point of hogging the microphone. Okay, moderator wasn't prepared for it. We got a big long parking lot, the moderator's here, and the people going down here counting hands through the roof, and didn't know the people were down here were being harassed to keep your hand down. So we ended up failing at that meeting, and a citizen's petition came forward, much to my chagrin, at $5 million less, 6.9. Where they got that number, I don't know. But that's what, because we're a committee, you're a committee, you can't make a warrant article. Select people have to do it, or it has to be done by petition. Two ways it can be done. So that number came up at 6.9. And we had a second meeting at what we have is the ball field, and it was organized by the fire department. By that I mean parking was, they had lines on the field for parking. You could sit in your car and they would raise your hand, but you could also walk up front to a microphone that people were gonna stand in line. So the people we knew were gonna be there, that were gonna oppose it, there are other people that are gonna say positive things, so it wasn't totally controlled by the negative people. So, because people wanted it, but they had to get out there and say it. So, that article passed thanks to those people, and then there was a 2.5 override, and that passed for $6.9 million.
Over 40 years?
I'm sorry?
Over how many years?
Well, we didn't know at the time, but it turned out to be a blessing for the time frame. We got 40 years because we went through USDA.
USDA,
Mike,
yep.
Chief Bussell was in contact with Senator Goby, who said, you should talk to USDA. They don't do a lot of things, but they do public safety. And at the time, they were willing to lock us in. Once we had our paperwork, our application had to be detailed in and accepted and all that detail, then the date, at that date, they would give us the rate that they would give us. 3 years later, or whenever it was complete, and we had to borrow short-term money for 90 days, which we weren't used to doing. That's a whole
So
other.
you did a bridge loan, basically?
No, well, we had to go out and borrow $6.9 million to complete the whole project. And you can't go out and borrow 6.9, the treasurer's office isn't gonna let you, state treasurer's office isn't gonna let you. So they let us do it in two lumps, 3.5 and 3.4 million. So once you spend the 3.5, now they'll lease the 3.4 to complete. So you're spending the money along, and then once you get all your paperwork, and USDA, I don't know if you're gonna get involved with USDA, but that could be an option, but they had to be kept in the loop of the paperwork. So every requisition, every monthly requisition from the general contractor, they had to see it, the architect signed on it, the OPM signed off on it, and the committee approved it, and then it went to the paperwork, a copy of it went to USDA. So that when everything went down the road, and we asked for 6.9 million, they saw all the paperwork over 14 months, there was 14 or 15 requisitions. So, the general contractor submits a requisition, not the plumbing contractor, not the electrical contractor, it's all done by the general
prime-
contractor.
The general, sure.
And he pays his subs. And oh, by the way, you may pick him, but he has to pick the first in line plumbing contract. He has to pick, unless that person can be disqualified, and there's a whole system of being qualified to be an acceptable bidder.
Yep.
If you don't follow the rules, you play dirty politics or dirty stuff, you can get pulled off the list and not be an acceptable plumbing or electrical or sheet rock or whatever, contractor. So, and they know that. They know that. So we got passed, and there was 2.5 override. And then we didn't know about USDA in the very beginning. It was, we thought we were gonna have to go to the state for 30 years, which is the maximum you can get from the state. And we had that option, but we also had the option to go to this USDA. It required a special application to go through theirs, and we had to pay a little bit extra. Their architect, or USDA architect in Amherst, said yes, but the USDA architect in DC said no on a couple of aspects. I don't get into the details, so you may not get there. But anyway, we were fortunate to get USDA for 40 years at 2.125%. Gone
Yep.
now. And that represents approximately $250,000 a year for 40 years, which is less than 2% of our budget. We got a $9 million budget, $250,000 is chump change on a $9 million budget,
Yep.
okay? So you all know about prevailing wage, you know that has to be a part of it. You're not gonna get away from it. You can get away from it by people donating their labor. But you can't I've heard stories of, does everybody know who Dean Mazzarella is? He's the, you don't know, or you're shaking your head, you don't?
Don't know.
He's the mayor of Leominster.
No.
He has a lot of resources of people will come out, contractors will come out of the woods and help and donate their time on municipal projects. and they got money in the bank. They can pay for a lot of things. They're building a monstrosity of a police station right now that is, you know, it's humongous. And I don't know what their needs were, but it's pretty opulent. But they needed it, they got some land. So, where was I going with that?
Prevailing wage.
What?
Prevailing wage.
Prevailing, yeah.
Prevailing wage. So that's the only way, unless you've got, and you can't even, the general contractor could be on the hook for that too. He's gotta be willing to say, Joe Smith will pour a slab over here. We're gonna pay for the concrete, but he's gonna donate his labor. Because part of the requirements of the paperwork of all this is the general contractor has to prove on paper
Yep.
that he's paying prevailing wage. Because if he gets audited, or he will get audited by somebody who wants to make sure that everybody's on the, he's gotta show that he's paying prevailing wage.
Did you have anybody
No, we
that
didn't.
gave, okay.
No, I'm just saying that that's the only way to get away from prevailing wage unless you move to New Hampshire.
Right.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think maybe just a quick comment on that is that prevailing wage, from my experience, is for construction. And if it's not classified as construction, as was discussed, that, these module units are built elsewhere, regardless of what the prevailing rate is, if it's classified as construction, prevailing labor rates apply. If it's not classified as construction, other rates are
I
used.
think you're right, I think
Okay.
you're right.
I just,
If it's modular built somewhere else.
Off-site.
Off-site.
Right.
Right.
You know, not where it's gonna finally be placed.
Right.
But any construction on site, prevailing rate,
Okay.
my understanding.
Mhm. That's true.
So I saw on the website that you did explore.
I'm
Did
sorry?
you explore that? I think there was something in the
No,
website about, okay.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
When you start attaching something to an existing structure, I mean, that fire station we have is 50 years old. It's still functioning great. They got big steel beams up in the ceiling that have got a 2.5% pitch on them, and it's got 4 bays plus a 5th one on the left, and now we have 2 more bays. So we added on to that building. We were advised to go 2 feet higher because of water levels and grade, and there's a whole bunch of stuff about, what you probably didn't see in the back.
The ginormous septic system?
What?
The
Yeah,
ginormous
right.
septic system?
No, we don't have town sewage.
Right, yeah, you got leach fields out the back.
Yes, but that was a jump change compared to
Oh.
what we had to do for a sprinkler system.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, Chief, whether you need to put a sprinkler system in, but I never found out that, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe one of you does. If you call it a police fire building, does it need to be sprinkled? If it's called public safety, does that make it be sprinkled?
So under the building code, any building over 7,500 square feet has to be sprinklered.
Even if you don't have it,
Correct.
okay?
Yeah, you can appeal it to the, you know,
Get a waiver.
you can, but it will most likely get denied. And it will most likely get denied by the state, and the financing authority will say they will not finance this.
Okay.
You won't get
So-
it insured.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
I didn't get involved in that, all I know is that the fire chief told us we had to do it.
Yep.
So we have a 30,000 gallon cistern in the back, under the ground.
Mhm.
God's pump that has to go down through a hole in the ceiling
Yep.
and be lowered in by a crane,
Yep.
and a generator that will work for the building, and then if the pump kicks in for the sprinkler, it's beefy enough to do that. And there were some mistakes made on some of the drawings, and we had to make some changes. The architect called for two 1,000 gallon propane tanks as a supply for the generator. We said no, because propane, if it just sits there, it goes stale. You have to empty them maybe in a year or two and fill them up again. And every hospital or assisted living place that my mother's in and other places, they got Kohler generators with diesel fuel tanks on the ground, that's what we went through.
Mhm.
And ours had to be custom spec because it had to deal with the building, and if the sprinkler system went off when there was, there would be a two-stage or something, I don't know the technical parts of that.
Yeah.
All I know is there was a lot of hoops we went through to get the right generator from Kohler, and delivery dates kept getting pushed off and back then.
Yeah.
So, thank you for that history, Mike. I just wanna make sure we have enough time. Carrie, did
Yeah.
we go through those questions that you guys
I'm
had?
gonna do that, I had another question for him while, he was talking, so we really wanna know what kind of surprises you encountered as you were going through the building. I know that they talked about, every time there was a change, it was it was automatically $10,000. Like every change was like $10,000, so,
I
okay,
mean, some changes were deductions, okay, and some changes weren't. Let's go back and say, we got a core building here, and this is what we need. And the police wanted a two-bay garage so that they could put vehicles in and inspect vehicles in inclement weather if they pulled somebody and check for drugs or whatever, and that had to be, there was a two-bay garage that was deemed an accessory. And we also wanted to put a roof over police cruisers to have a carport. And we said, okay, this is what we want as a base part, and then this accessory here was the building on the end, two-bay carport for the police, and then, a two-bay garage with a roof on it and a foundation, and then a carport. And when you go out to bid, you have to bid, the people have to bid for the base bid, and then they have to bid for option number 1 and option number 2. And you can't pick and choose, you have to take one. You can't say, I wanna bypass 1 and go to 2, no, you have to take one. So you have to list in priority which one of your options that you want to designate as an option, and you go down the line. And if you can afford one, then we chose one, but we didn't get funding for I wanted there's 4 parking spaces behind the building for police cruisers, and we wanted just a carport, just a roof over it, steel structure. I don't remember what it was $99,000. No, that was something else, I don't know, but anyway, that's a part of the bid process. So, go ahead.
Sure,
Mike?
Madam Chair, based on my experience, and maybe Nate can update me with more recent procurement law, and also Heather, but it depends on how you craft your procurement. And there may be some restrictions based on the source of the funding. They may have control over it, like Mike said, you must follow, this is the bidding and selection criteria that's gonna be used. But I happen to know, having done public contracts, that I could have 3 bid options, the base bid plus 3, and I could pick and choose. I did it several times. So
In
I
our-
think it depends on who's controlling the procurement.
Did you wanna answer that one, Nate, or you want me to answer that one?
You can,
So, it's actually, so in the law it's called alternates, right? They're not options, they're alternates.
Yeah, alternate bids.
But
yeah.
Mike won. Mike Ashby is 100% right? The law actually says you have to take them in the order. So you can say my shopping list is milk, eggs, bread. And if you run out of money out of milk, after milk, you're done. You can't say, well, the eggs are less or the bread's less, I'm gonna take that up. So it's really important when you're doing these pieces, especially with working with the architect, that you're trying to get ballpark figures of how much things are, so you have to do it. So we're required to do it by the alternate order, and like if you go to the training, they stress for like 2 days about you have to do it in order, you can't pick and choose.
Okay,
So it's.
and that's Massachusetts.
That's Massachusetts, it's a
Right.
pain in the butt. So whenever you're dealing with federal funds, right, so federal funds are messy because then you have to make sure you're also following federal procurement law. And federal procurement law is higher power than state procurement law, and I try not to deal with federal procurement law because I'm not trained in federal procurement law, right?
So during that process, the architect is gonna have price per square foot of everything. So you're gonna have an idea of, okay, this option B should come in at
X dollars.
at this, and this
Yeah.
one should come in at that. The we didn't go out to bid until we got 6.9 million approved. We can't go out to bid
Right,
and not have the money.
Right.
right, yeah.
So you gotta get the money first, and they're gonna, it's public record,
Yeah.
they can look up and see that we passed 6.9 million,
Yeah.
which is pretty darn close to what the winning bidder put a number in at. And so they know, and there's room there, profit's not a dirty word, but they gotta be able to make it in there, and they hired a subcontractor for the site work and all that. It was Powell out of Lunenburg, was excellent. I can't say enough positive things about Powell. They're very good, and they did a great job, but that's the process of doing that. And then it was, okay, you're building something that is public safety building. Is it gonna be hurricane proof? Maybe not, but it's gotta be earthquake resistant. And I know enough about construction to know what I know and know what I don't know. So in construction, most houses would use a half or maybe 5/8 bolt stuck in the concrete where you put a plate down. And that's adhering the plate to the foundation. In this building, there were 4 rows, 2 outside rows, 2 inside rows. There were major bearing things with trusses on them. They put 1-inch bolts every 12 inches on all 4 walls. That isn't going anywhere. Plus, what's called tiebacks, which are these funky looking brackets that tie this to that. Even though you nail it, you gotta tie this to that, so that high winds come along, it isn't gonna come apart. It's gonna withstand pretty heavy duty stuff. So go with your questions.
Did you explore, was the building always brick? Was there any exploration into doing a steel or anything else? Did it change the cost? Was the,
Well, the brick was the fire station. Masonry is very expensive. One of the most expensive labor costs out there. In my professional life, I got a building in Leominster in Industrial Park, and it was brick. When I was looking at it, I was talked out of building a brick building because of the labor. It's cheaper to put up a 4-foot concrete wall and put up steel beams and put up metal, because masonry is very expensive. So, we chose a color scheme. It was all low maintenance, and we tied the lower
yeah.
red was
Yep.
tied in to look like the brick.
Yeah.
And I worked with something else, and, you're gonna build a whole new building for both, or you're gonna add to one existing?
this is a whole
All
new
new.
building,
Okay, so
yeah.
you got the choice to make it all look the same. I worked with a couple of architects, and there's a couple points I wanna make. When you tie into an existing building, somebody may say, oh, you shouldn't try to make it look like the old building, because you can't. How many people have been to the Wayside Inn? Do you know where it is? Have you been to
Yes.
it?
Yep.
So there's a nice dining room, but on the outside, it looks pretty darn close
Yep.
to the old building. They did a nice job, but architects would tell you shouldn't do that.
Mhm.
You look at our library edition, and they didn't even try to look at it. They painted some board brick red to make the brick, but that's, and that's a whole nother thing.
I think a
So did
point
yeah.
regarding that is that architects, we're the client, so architects don't decide for us.
Well, that's the other point I wanna make. Very good. Some of them have big egos, some of them don't. I caution you as extremely as I can to remember, you are the customer, not the architect.
Yeah.
You are the customer. You tell him or her, and they, you can all be professional, but if you let them, my wife was on a building committee for an addition to the library. And they had to hire, instead of the local architect, which I work with, which is great, and he listened. He didn't have an ego, but they got somebody out of Boston, and this guy was involved in the libraries, and boy, the money went through the roof, and it was a design that nobody liked, but that's what they did because they were landlocked. But it was the committee members didn't understand that they were the customer, and they were being pushed by the architect.
So you're saying the exterior of the building always remained the same, there was no other,
We
no
didn't do
one looked
anything to-
into anything other than the way the exterior was in the architect's drawing?
Of the existing fire station,
No, of the new part of the building?
the new part of the building was, as we,
Okay.
we sat there and, some of us committee members, we're sitting there picking colors, and he's laying out colors. Inside walls, colors, you know, wainscoting, if you went inside, the color of this, the color of that, and suggested 3 colors. So all of that, we got to decide as a committee because he brought in samples, you pick,
Sure.
it's your building.
Yeah. He's answered quite a few of the questions as he's talked, honestly. Did you go out canvassing in order to get the 6.9 to pass? Like, what did you
No.
feel, okay,
No. Because the town had already committed and spent $540,000, there was they had skin in the game.
okay,
Mhm.
Who said that?
Yeah.
And so that meant we had, because when we failed in 2007, after we failed for $3 million, the architect said, let's go back to the town and ask for $250,000 so we can have construction-ready drawings, so that if, you know, money is available out there in the twilight of wherever it comes from, and you're construction-ready, you got a site and drawings, boom.
Yeah.
They turned down $250,000. So 8 years later, they spent $8 million.
okay.
What we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Did, and you said on the website, the questions that are on there are questions you generated, your
I'm not
group
sure.
generated, or, okay,
I'm not
Did you
sure.
have somebody
The
separate?
committee didn't do that,
okay,
okay? Okay, going back to the OPM. Once we had the OPM, he was taking minutes.
okay,
He was taking minutes for the committee, and he would send us all an agenda, 48 hours, because he would send it to the town clerk and to someone on the website. So those are the 2 places under COVID it was allowed to be.
right,
So and we got them all as committee members in advance, and then we got minutes from the previous meetings. And then we were asked to read them before, so that when you get there, you've had a chance to read the minutes, and somebody brings them up,
Yeah.
move the minutes, yes, and so on.
all right, I mean, honestly, you've answered most of the questions I had here, so, in the time that you've spoken, so, does anyone else have any additional questions for Mike?
So Mike, the only question I have, I know you mentioned a bunch, and I don't know if you talked more about it, during the 6 minutes when I had no cell phone reception, which is highly possible. But the opposition group, right? So you mentioned it a couple times, one time was, I think, initially with the cars, and one time was even, you know, before the FAQs, you know, there was a lot of people
We had
putting
an
out
opposition from a
misinformation.
selectman,
Oh,
who wasn't part of the original group. So the selectman comes in and comes up with, you know, we're working with a $7 million budget, $7 million figure of what it's gonna cost, and he comes in and says that he thinks it should be 5. Ask him a question, what do you cut? He didn't have an answer. He just, 5 felt more comfortable to him. So then, to appease him, which I didn't like, both of the chiefs were on our committee.
yeah.
And people, I'm not good on politics, okay, and so I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but they felt it was not a good image to have the chiefs on the committee, conflict of interest. I disagreed, but they were willing to set up, so they were still on the committee, but they weren't voting members.
Okay,
And then 2 other people were placed on the committee to review our work to satisfy this one selectman.
3 or 5 member select board.
I'm sorry, what?
is it 3?
It's a
3.
Ew.
Yeah, and so he comes in, and he was agreeable to have these 2 people sit in the committee. So they sit in the committee for a couple of months, or whatever, I can't remember exactly. And they look at what we're doing, and they look at the OPM, they look at the architect, and they both said, these numbers are good, they're all good. For some reason, he chose not to believe the representative said, and he still was opposed to it. And at the time, we had a $50,000 grant to the town from, I can't remember who it was, we got a $50,000 grant. That cost us 3 months of time, 3 months of extra time for the OPM, the architect, for 3 months. That blew our $50,000 cushion by that one selectman.
So I guess my question to you, right, so as we're getting started as a committee here and starting to look towards going down a similar direction, right? Would you give us any advice, anything to look out for opposition, any way to get ahead of it before it even starts?
No, because you're not gonna know where it's gonna come from.
Okay.
I mean, I would never have guessed a select person who, I mean, he was not a stupid man. He was young, bright. For some reason, he had this $5 million number in his head. Where he got it, it just made him feel good. He was asked multiple times, tell us how to get to $5 million. What do you cut? Didn't have any answers. Multiple meetings. And the chair of the select board, said, okay, we'll let you do this. And he basically called this guy's bluff, and the guy, the third selectman, didn't have an answer, wouldn't change his mind. But he was outvoted by the other two to go to 6.9 million.
So,
But we wasted
Time
extra
and money.
time. The
Yeah.
committee's time isn't being paid, but the architect and the OPM are.
yeah, and the costs are going up while you're
Yeah,
sitting there.
exactly.
trying.
No, well, but
Well,
at that point, we hadn't gone out to bid.
No,
This was coming up with 7.5 million to go to the voters,
Yeah.
okay? Because it was needs analysis. They weren't there for what the chiefs needed for square footage. The architect met with each one of them. The
So,
previous architect and the previous fire chief in 2007 wouldn't let the architect inside the building. He was not a participant. He made the architect walk and pace the outside door just to get the square footage of the existing fire station.
Well, I don't think we're gonna have that.
No,
opportunity yet.
I know, but I'm just saying, you don't know where it's coming from.
Right, no, right, right.
So we had in 2007, we had a fire department and a fire chief that was just bad. We have totally 180 degrees now in both departments. Both departments. We didn't have opposition. We had a struggle with the former police chief who didn't know how to read drawings. He had conceptually couldn't transfer that image to his needs. How do we deal with that? Spend extra time, meet with him. There was time, so that wasn't something you could prepare yourself.
so you mentioned earlier that you thought the Q&A page was extremely helpful because it got ahead of people and also gave people a spot to go that actually had the neutral, correct information.
Well, I think the Q&A came out of erroneous statements on Facebook by others.
Okay.
So
So
you're,
somebody was policing that, not us.
okay,
Whether it was the friends of the public safety building,
Okay.
they were out there.
And
I
you
mean,
guys
it was
had a friends group that was formed.
Well, they formed it on their own. We had nothing to do
But
with it.
there was an independent friends group that was
They
formed.
wanted it. They
Okay,
wanted it.
yep.
They wanted it for the town.
Okay.
And they were behind the scenes.
Okay.
And, I know 2 or 3 names, and I got to meet the chairwoman. She's a wonderful lady, and but I mean, she spends her day. I went to her house one day. She spends her day with earphones, and she works at home, talking to wherever around the world, and but she's very capable and knows her stuff. And they were the ones who offered to offset the negative or lies that were being out there. Because if you don't offset it, people, that's one thing I learned as a selectman. You think you just be professional and say, if you don't counteract statements, then they're believed. You have to push back.
You have to own your story.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I didn't know that. I was trying to be polite, and I'm a selectman at a meeting, and people, and you have to own it, but you have to push back in a way that says, no, it's not. But if you don't and just let it go, then, well, if he didn't say anything, the people, it must be right what he said. And that was a lesson I personally didn't come to at that point in time. During this time, the other thing that happened in my own case was the selectmen, when we got to the 540, we won the 540 bid, one person asked the selectman, who was leading the group, if he was gonna be the chairman of this new group. His name was Mark, and at the end of the meeting, I was there, I said, Mark, you must stay after everybody leaves. and I'd been on that committee, I've been on other committees. And I told him, I said, Mark, I know you don't wanna do this, but, I mean, I know you feel uncomfortable about being chairman, he kinda added it. I offered to be the chairman, and I told him, I said, it's not my ego, but I wanna run, I know how to run a meeting, I wanna run a meeting and keep out the yahoos. So that's why the open meeting was at the public comments were next to the last part, and we had items that were gonna be taken in place, and nobody was gonna be allowed to speak, whether in person or on YouTube. So I chose to do that only for the prime reason because I had experience in Robert's rules and the rest of it.
Right, right. To something he said, I think the town's been very forthcoming lately of getting all the information out timely. I do think that's gonna help us tremendously with some of what he's referring to that he was experiencing in his town. I don't know,
I think you're gonna have to figure out a way
Same way,
to
but-
get drawing and OPM and architect funding first.
Yeah,
I don't think you're gonna go
that's
out.
our goal.
Yes,
That's
right.
our first goal, is that.
Cause, and, you know, maybe you gotta find some money just so you know how much that is. Spend $5,000 and,
We have about $60,000 to do a feasibility study. Do you remember exactly how much?
that should be enough to get a qualified architect to talk to the chiefs about square footage. Cause it's gonna come down to square footage, if you already own the land,
Mhm.
so it's all square footage. And it's gonna boil down to prevailing weights, and he's gonna, you know, it's an average, you know, bays with, 4 bays with fire trucks on them don't cost the same as cells and officer rooms and sergeant rooms and chiefs and administrators and all those things. But it's an average, so they're gonna tell you that average cost per square foot for a building of this nature is gonna be X, $250, $300 a square foot or something. So you should be able to spend that money looking for a qualified architect to help with the feasibility. And really, it's needs analysis. The chiefs have to be input and say, this is what I need, or what I would like. And I went and visited our son out in Great Barrington and got up one morning before my wife went down the street to get bagels, and I passed the Great Barrington Police Department, which looked like it had been in a converted Friendly's building. So I said, as I went by, I'm gonna stop in on the way back, and on the way back, I stopped in and introduced myself, walked in the front door, they didn't know anybody, and I said, I gave my name and told them my position, and I want to ask them a few questions. And one of the main questions I wanted to ask was, what do you feel of the importance, as a police department, what do you feel the need is of a sally port? Do you have a sally port now? Would you like one?
Sure.
Okay, but, I mean,
What barely has a door.
what?
He barely has a door.
Okay, but,
No, they
but
talked a
all
lot
we
about
had,
this
all we
during
had
the-
was
yeah,
a
yeah.
24-inch, 2-inch pipe bolted to the wall to cuff somebody.
That's what they got.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
they
it's
have.
pretty bad. And even the toilet in the place was embarrassing. The office had to use and somebody had to use, clean up the stuff that miscreants leave behind themselves. But, so that's enough money, in my opinion, to go out and say, we're gonna need 10,000 square foot building. I don't know, pull a number out. What, you know, how many bays? And, okay, our chief did something that nobody caught to make a bone about it. But in the original drawings, there were 2 storage rooms. In the end, there were 2 bunk beds, because he's of a belief, you're of a belief, that in the future, volunteers or not, fire departments aren't gonna be able to get volunteers. You gotta pay people. And you gotta pay people, you know, you gotta bunks, that we gotta,
24
in that
hours.
fire station, there's 2 bunk beds, 2 bunk rooms, there's a shower stall for the firefighters, there's a bathroom for the firefighters. You know, if they gotta spend, you know, one of the things we got were these expensive police lockers that are, I don't know, 24 inches wide, and they have a seat, and they're 3,000 plus bucks a piece. And we got a bank of them. Why do we need those? Well, at the 9/11 ceremony, I met a new officer in town and had a chance to ask him, how does he like those? He loved it, because there's a place, they walk in, who knows? They walk in civvies, they put the uniform on, take a shower, and leave in their civvies. In that trailer, I don't know what's going on, but people were complaining, why do we have to spend that money? Well, the police officers are liking that, and on the top, there are this electrical place where they can put in their batteries for their phones or whatever they need to charge while it's sitting there. That's their locker, it's got their name on it, they're not cheap, it's part of the expense, and there was, I think, 10 and more could be added in the men's, and there's 2 women's lockers. There's a women's police locker and bathroom, and a men's police locker and bathroom. And right now we're lucky to have 24/7. In the future, what is it going to be? Is it going to be 3, 4 people each shift every day? It could be, but our building can handle it. You think about the future. I was not willing to go forward without a sally port. I was not willing to go forward without cells. I don't know what you guys have to do, but I'm hearing stories that the state police won't take anybody under 18. We can't go to this department, have trouble taking people you want to restrain over the weekend. You arrest somebody on Friday, court is until Monday. You got to send your police officers sit in Lunenburg for the weekend, because they're not going to pay their cops to sit there. So I personally was not going to give in on cells or a sally port, and there was no opposition on the court, on the committee. There was one woman who came in and said, "Oh, we spent so much money in the last year on police, with other towns." Did that include wages for our officers to be there? And are you building a building? I mean, our building, the fire department, this building's 50 years old. Are we building a building for 20 years? No, we're building it for 50 or more years.
Right.
And we had a little bit of a bite with Board of Health and Public Safety. 25 people or more. If you have 25 people or more, you gotta have public water. Well, is it 25 people all at the same time, or 8 people coming in and 8 people going out? That's not 25 people. So we had to fight with the Board of Health to convince them we don't need a public water supply well. We won, but that took some effort, because they were convinced that that was an issue.
I think, Madam
Yeah.
Chair, Nate's.
I do have a question,
Okay.
but it's kind of on another topic. Were you hesitant about the 40-year USDA loan? Because I know a couple meetings ago, Chief Hayes had made a comment about 40 years being a lengthy period of time. And after 30 years, 35 years, you're going to have to start making investments into the building again. So,
We didn't get that far, and I don't know about investments, maybe.
you won't have to deal with it. I'm willing to pay.
No, but we were happy to get $250,000 a year for 40 years. I mean, to pay that as part of the budget. What's gonna happen later, I don't know. The building doesn't lend itself to additions right now. And we were happy to get what we had. Now, if you've got enough land, you've looked at Ashburnham, they got drive-through bays. They had all kinds of land. We had 610 feet of frontage. I couldn't talk them into having a industrial park road going. We got 34 acres there. But no, everything had to be using the 610 feet of frontage with Conservation Commission, who were not
Yeah.
our
It's
friends.
actually funny because of the way the parking
Yeah.
And, stormwater runoff and
Yeah.
all the BS with that.
Yeah.
And the leach field was a mound in the back.
Yeah.
We,
You know.
we got all that on the site.
So, no, we weren't thinking about what the needs of the building would be 30 or 40 years. It's hard enough to say, we think, because there's rooms for the police officer, there's a day room that both the police and
Mhm.
fire can share for lunches, or dinners whenever they're on shift, which would never have happened before under 2 separate structures. And for the first time in years, there's gonna be there's been a fire department Christmas party for the last few years. Guess what? The police department's coming and joining for the first time.
Nice.
I'm pretty happy about
Yeah.
that.
Was there ever any talk about maybe the municipal offices joining in on this, or?
Well, I wanted that concept, when I came up with 610 feet of frontage, I said, I don't wanna waste 34 acres on our project. I wanted an industrial park road to come in and take advantage, senior citizens, all this backland.
Yeah.
I got my head handed to me. The architects, oh, it's gonna cost this, and stormwater runoff and all the rest of it. And I said, we could look to the future, because I was thinking we needed town offices. We need a new building for the highway department. You could put all that in 34 acres. Yes, Mike?
Mike,
Yeah,
yeah.
Madam Chair, a
Yeah.
couple of questions. I'm interested in what grants you applied for, who could provide grants, and what the purpose
I
that
don't
those
know.
grants were used for.
I don't know.
Because you mentioned a 50K grant. Who is that from, if you know?
One of our state reps. I
So
don't know.
probably-
Probably
Earmark.
earmark.
Okay, it's an earmark, all right, all right.
You know,
And the
it-
legislators-
It was specifically for the public safety building.
Right, okay.
So
It was a-
it wasn't to be used on anything else. So we had 540, we got 50 from the state, so technically we had 590. But we lost the 50 in the 3 months from the
Sure.
select.
Yeah,
on that
yeah,
delay.
yeah.
And then the second one is, my personal concern is about existing square footing. Square footage? Did you identify that up front? Okay, we've got, 100K square foot, and now we're gonna add this, and here's the plan for that existing 100K square foot. We're gonna demo that, or we're going to repurpose it as this.
We didn't
Was
do-
there any kind of a plan like that?
No, we
Okay.
had the town land, and there was enough land adjacent to the
Not the
existing.
land, I'm talking about the actual facility improvements upon the land that you already have, existing
We already had,
buildings.
we only had one building.
Okay.
It was a 4-bay fire station that was built 50 years ago.
And then
That's
you
it.
had trailers for the police department,
on a
was that was a
separate-
separate
on-
project?
separate
Yeah,
pro-
yeah.
Okay, on
Yeah,
that one
was
there was.
separate.
That was behind town hall,
Alright.
because it was adjacent to the elementary school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what I would suggest, Madam Chair, is that we at least identify what our existing square footage is for any of the uses that would be contemplated for some sort of a public safety building, and then identify how those spaces would be used in the future. 'Cause there's nothing like an existing facility that will fill the void. Maybe that's not the best plan, so we need to know, because you're gonna pay a tail for maintaining an old facility, paying for utilities, so we gotta make sure we get out of the facilities we're in.
And we have all the mock-ups,
we-
so we
right,
have a
right.
rough idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
for us, we're creating a new public safety budget, because it's no longer 2 separate departments for
Right.
heat and electricity, it's one building for both.
Yep.
They each got their labor and their machinery and stuff, but it's one building for, the highway department is mowing the lawn. Never thought they would do that, but, we got a new highway department head, and they're mowing lawn,
So
which,
was there any opposition when you
Chief.
had to increase
We
that
keep
budget? Because
Main
I'm sure you
Street,
had to
right?
increase.
For what?
For the
So
public
we
safety
keep that for
building,
your
did
smaller
you,
vehicles,
No.
right?
when you combined them, did it, some things must have increased? Or did it,
I don't know,
So it's commercial property. Yeah.
when did we just go in? I'm not sure, I think it was in
Yeah.
last
Continue
May's
site.
town
The town doesn't wanna
meeting.
put money
Okay.
into the
There would
building
be a
now.
Can we
public
have one
safety.
meeting,
Just for
please?
storage.
Yeah.
It's
Guys.
just within a matter of years, it would be.
so I asked about,
10 times worse
if
than
he
it
had
is
any
now.
opposition to, when they combined it, and if that budget line item went up at all, so that's
Well,
what he's,
When you're combining both departments are paying electric bills, both departments are paying heating bills. Now you have one building, they're gonna be joined together. I can't imagine anybody in their right mind arguing, you're creating a line, but you're taking it from somewhere else, you're not just adding it. It's the logistics of accounting, plain and simple.
Okay.
cause some of the visits we had, they said, their electricity went up a lot, or they, you know, there were some different things
I
that
didn't
happened,
really
so
wanna
I
get
just,
into the subject, but it would.
okay.
The energy would go up.
Yeah, okay.
Cause right
Bigger
now, we
space.
Yeah.
have a one AC unit in a window
Mhm.
that barely keeps the place, well, it actually does pretty good in the hallway. And then we heat and stuff like that, but you're talking about, yeah, it's more energy efficient and everything's,
That's more
but
sense.
you have an HVAC system, we do not have that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, what are you guys, what's this, it just blows air around, it's not
We have the main splits
legitimate,
in there
yeah.
and stuff like that.
So it's like, I think people, you know, there is gonna be that money that comes together. But if we actually have an appropriate building, I think overall the cost would go up. Now, you get rid of
Be
us
more
paying.
efficient, though.
More efficient,
Much more
yeah.
efficient.
But if you get rid of the lease we're paying.
Exactly.
That's more, you're gonna
Yeah,
still
yeah.
save money in the long run.
Yeah. I just, I'm thinking
But-
of some things that might come up from people and what they might ask, and.
But
so
you're not gonna
just
know
in
that in the beginning stages and in the development stages with needs analysis, you're not gonna know any of that.
No, but it's come up previously when we've gone for, some of these questions have come up previously, so I'm just thinking of some of the things people might ask, I wanted to know from you if
Well, I
you
mean,
found any
did
opposition to
Ryan's
those type of
mock-ups.
things.
We
but-
didn't. I
Okay.
mean,
No, I don't
we
know.
were not gonna put a building in that wasn't efficient and have
Sure.
air conditioning in it. You know,
Yeah,
it-
yeah.
If I had
You know,
to
the
guess,
fire department
yeah,
doesn't necessarily need it, but the police department does. And anybody with a computer needs it because you can't have hot computers. So
Okay.
it was
Right.
not part of the,
I would assume so, yeah.
Okay,
didn't come up, didn't come up.
So,
all right, go ahead, did you have another
yeah,
question?
so part of the 6.9, did that include furnishing?
In some cases, yes,
Okay.
yes. We worked with, we had a connection with, WB Mason, and we could pick furniture. So, and they were approved bidder, subcontractor,
Yep.
so both chiefs went and met, and they picked out, you know, it was all gonna be coordinated.
Right.
So they each had the same,
Yeah.
but not, it was all gonna be, you know, the chairs and
Right.
tables and everything is all from WB Mason, so, yeah, I mean, the police officers have to, there was a room with 4 desks.
Yep.
So a police officer has to write a report.
Yep.
Maybe another one's gotta write a report next to them. Those are all desks with computer connections, and it's all sitting there in an air-conditioned room. And there's a sergeant's room in the back, and there's a detective's room, which we don't even have a detective yet. But, you know, if in the future there's one, and our previous chief had a lot of drawbacks. And one of them was he believed that he had to keep paper files. I don't know what you're doing, but, you know,
We've gotten rid of a lot of paper.
well, but here's a guy who's got file cabinet in the basement of the town hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And didn't understand that you could put it on paper, so it was created, I didn't find out until the end, but it was too late, that there's a room for file cabinets, for the paper files for the police department.
yeah.
I think it's gonna be used for something else.
We need to keep some of it, but yes.
I mean, a lot of it can be electronic, and the
I
other
mean,
part of
every
it,
town we looked at had something like that, yeah.
the other part that's really important is he's gonna need an evidence room that is very carefully, because our chief told me, only 2 people in the department are authorized to go into the evidence room. There's a room in the front where stuff goes, there's a locker, you put something in, and it's taken from the inside, and then from there it's analyzed, do what they do, and then it goes back to a back room where it's stored. Only 2 people in the police department could go in that room. And when we had an open house, you could look in a window and see the door, but that's all you could do.
Yeah. All right, are there any additional questions, just because we're running
No.
kind of
Sure.
late now at this point, and I know, I mean, I wanted to maybe detail some of the outline of what now that we've gotten all this information, like where do we wanna go with some of our plans at this point, just to see like, okay, what can we take out, what's in there, and, but I think at this point, I wanna table those for the next time.
I think an architect's gonna help you there.
We already have plans, we have plans that we did a while ago, and
Drawn up by an
I,
architect?
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
just renderings of
Yeah.
what it would look like. They're not actual plans.
I don't
they're
care
not-
about the
they're not
building, I'm talking
construction,
about,
right,
I'm
they're not
talking about
construction plans,
footprint.
Yeah.
Flow of people walking into a building. Because here's another thing, we have a dark station. I don't know if you have a dark station. The police chief was in charge, former police chief was in charge of dispatch. Well, in Ashby, we had very little demand and hard to keep people 24/7. Fortunately, we joined Pepperell in regional dispatch. Saved money.
We do likewise here.
Yeah,
We have a regional dispatch.
yeah.
And so, and then after that, Townsend joined. So we even got it, after Townsend joined, our cost went down even more for the dispatch.
Right.
So we have a dark station. So you all know what that means?
Yes.
We have the same thing.
Yes, yeah, right.
Okay,
Right.
so-
Except
Yeah.
multiple buildings.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to the front door, pushes a
With
button,
multiple dark
there'll be
stations.
somebody in Pepperell saying, "Can I help you?"
Right.
And they'll have a camera looking down and
Yeah,
saying, and,
yeah.
"Oh, my husband is chasing me." She pushed the button, let the person in, go to the door on the right, and the husband comes and he ain't gonna get in.
Right, right.
And an officer might be down on Main Street, he'll come to the station and from the back door and go in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right. So, I think, I apologize when I said plans, I was talking about the rough things that have like the meeting room in it with like the zillion people. I just thought we could kind of look and clarify a few things that we've talked about and what we need and probably what we don't need, but, again, I'm gonna table that for the next meeting, Mike.
Well, Madam Chair, I don't know how much more of the items you want to cover tonight, but could we thank Mr. Reggio and then continue with the meeting so he can
Yes.
get on
yes.
with things? So I'd like to say thank you, Mike,
You're
for
welcome.
sharing your
Thank you very much.
your
Yes, very
time
helpful.
and your
Don't be
information.
afraid
Very
to
helpful.
call me again.
Yeah, no, we'll email if we have any, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It was a hard process and you're not, getting the information out in the public that's accurate is gonna be more important than worrying about where the opposition is coming from. Cause your accurate information is gonna dispel the opposition, wherever it comes from.
Did you do any sort of, just one last question, did you do any sort of like, hey, look at how bad this is kind of videos, or?
There was one, yes, I think, actually, that was done in 2007. One of the committee members one of my friends I got to go on the committee with me, who's no longer with us, but he was a communications teacher in Gardner, and so he got a video together and did a video of the terrible former 2-bedroom classroom of that and put it up online, and how bad it was. What did the police have? Used lockers from the high school.
We've
You know?
used lockers from the Gardner prison.
What's that?
We've used lockers from the Gardner prison. They're smaller than a high school locker.
You get people donate, or you get things. I remember years ago, I was a wannabe farmer, and they were having trouble heating the building. I put bales of hay around the perimeter of that thing for a couple of winters just to help out. It was tough. So being open and honest, and you're not gonna know what the questions are, but you can, when the questions come up, you can get the right answers. Even if you don't have the answer, you can say, "We don't know right now." And it's better to say that than to say nothing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And again, I'm not a Facebook person, but social media or anything. So you could use it for your advantage to offset the people on there that have an axe to grind, who wanna do that. And that will help greatly to the opposition. You don't know where it's gonna come from.
I have one quick question. Did getting a new fire station affect people's homeowners insurance in
Haven't
any
got a
way?
clue.
Okay.
Haven't got a clue. And we didn't get a new fire station. Well, we got the same 4 bays of the old one still there. We got 2 additional bays.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it was really originally supposed to be designed for fire truck number 1 and ambulance to go out because they were closest to but with a mix-up in dimension of the drawing and USDA being antsy about saying that we couldn't have a step from the police fire department, we had to have a ramp to go down to the fire trucks. Want to explain that to me?
Because of your fire.
And now that we have a dark station, the only person that could have been in a wheelchair would have been a dispatcher.
Mhm.
Now we don't have a dispatcher, you're either police or fire. You can't be in a wheelchair for either of those jobs, but we have a ramp going from 14 inches higher
Right.
new building to the old building.
Yeah.
So,
Probably has to do with fire exits and things like that.
I mean, what it cost us was the feet to back up a
Right.
truck that would have gone in there.
Yeah.
And now there's ambulances instead of
Yeah.
truck. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not hurting for bays.
Right.
So that ambulance, instead of being in one of the other bays, is now in the shorter bay.
The $500,000 seed money, that was just to do the feasibility and the architect, that was just a debt exclusion?
I don't know, I tried to look up the article, but I get
I,
blocked by the
I don't know, I
system.
mean, I think it was 2.5 override.
Yeah.
It passed the town meeting, and I think it was a 2.5 override.
Yeah.
But that was a figure that we came up with, and we explained what the money was gonna be used for.
Right.
Because we have to hire an OPM, we have to hire an architect, we have to generate drawings for construction. Can't have any of that stuff to go out to bid. And then we had a budget, we knew it was 7.4 million, and it got chopped to 6.9. But then we went out and asked for 6.9 million from the voters, based on funding from either the state or the USDA.
That would've
And we
been 10
were
today.
estimating it was gonna cost
And they use an existing
$250,000
building too.
townwide.
Right.
Townwide, you know, that's, anybody, a lot of people don't even know assessed numbers versus budget numbers, and they think that their assessment went up and the rate came down. A lot of people
Yeah.
have confusion with that.
Yep.
But at town meeting, you'd say, okay, this is $6.9 million and for a public safety building. And everybody knew how bad the fire station was. I mean, excuse me, the police station. The fire station was 50 years old. It wasn't sprinklered. It's sprinklered now.
The difficulty doesn't seem to be in Hubbardston town meeting. Town meeting, most things can seem to sneak by a town meeting. It's when it's you, yourself, in the ballot box.
Yeah.
That,
The bad part about that is that most town meetings are the first Saturday in May,
we're the first Tuesday in June.
June.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's still bad because you're gonna have a 2.5 override within 60 days,
Yeah.
which is summer vacation time, which is hard to get people to show up.
Unless you flip it, do it in April.
What's that?
You could flip it, do it the other way. Do
Well,
it
you could
first.
have a special town meeting in November, and then, and just for that, make them show up just for that. Don't make it part of the budget. Make it a special town meeting in November
Yeah.
for just the fire station, public safety building.
Calls
And
them
then
out.
they're gonna be around in
Yeah.
February, 60 days later,
Yep.
and they're not gonna have excuse, I gotta be on the Cape, or I gotta be here at the golf course, or whatever.
Calls them out.
Yep.
Because, you know, we changed the, I was instrumental in changing our selectmen's meeting from Tuesdays to Saturdays, because we'd meet on Tuesdays and couldn't get a quorum, the town meeting on a Tuesday, and there would be 3 Tuesdays in a row to get town meeting done. My wife and I came from Harvard. I knew that Harvard had a meeting on Saturday at 9:30. They did all the business at 1 o'clock, we're done for the year. Oh, we heard about the kids in the Little League, and we got Little League on Saturday morning. You know, you're not gonna please everybody. There's gonna be,
Yeah.
somebody's gonna complain about whatever you do. But if you keep your rudder straight and your focus and your information out there, so they can't say you're hiding anything. If you be open,
We're familiar with the public's eyes on us, yes, as they should be.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
as long as the information is accurate, that's the more important part. I mean, eyes are one thing, lies and misinformation, because people have wanna get at somebody or something, or they don't want their taxes to go up.
Right.
It's seemingly less about misinformation and more about prioritization. Because you talk about public safety buildings, suddenly people want to talk about disrepaired roads. And you talk about if doing roads, and people want to talk about services. Like, no matter what, it's a priority thing.
Yeah.
Well, for us, roads don't happen without chapter 90 money.
We're well aware.
We're pretty darn close too, sir.
And
All right, so,
So-
Mike, I wanna thank you so much again for your
You're welcome.
time, and,
Happy to
I
help.
think we're gonna,
And,
get ready to finish up our meeting, but this was very helpful.
If you got any other questions, you can email me, or I'll be happy to come back.
Great,
Great.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
You're
you.
very
welcome.
Drive safe.
Hopefully, people can learn from our mistakes and our do's and don'ts, but,
Well, I'm sure we'll have a few of our own along the way too,
well,
so.
you gotta have a focus and a direction, and I think spending the 60 grand and having real documents, or, you know, current, I don't know how old the documents you have now are, but floor plans and needs analysis.
4 years
Current
old.
needs and needs for the future. You know, you're not gonna have to project 50 years, but, you know, how about having 3 shifts a day for both departments and being able to be in the building?
Yeah.
And a place for air conditioned report writing and,
Yeah, right.
and a place where they can make their lunch and sit
Yeah.
in the day room, so.
Yeah.
We
Thank you,
wrote
sir.
our report.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
drive safe.
Thanks again, Mike.
Anytime.
We wrote our
Carrie,
reports
I
on
think
the
that's
fires and
where
we
you
like-
wanna go in that direction, kind of taking the plans from 4 years ago and going, all right, here's this, what do you actually need here?
That was what
Yeah.
this was for, the next item, so but I
Yeah, you're
feel
tabling
very
that.
overloaded with information right now, does
Feel
everyone
that.
else? So.
Well, we've gotta respect the time.
Yes, so, if everyone else is willing, I think I'd like to table this and start with this for next
Love it.
time around, and we can all maybe look at what Nate's put on the
Mhm.
in Google,
Yeah.
and we can look at, cause that was my plan, was to go through these and just kinda
Yeah.
sit and say, okay,
Beautiful.
given what we know now, what we've talked about, we can go through and now kinda say, okay, these are the different options, there was 3
Yeah.
options, and we can just kinda go through and just say, yes, here's where we are, so that when we start the feasibility
Yeah.
studies, we have a better,
In the next meeting, we really should talk about moving forward on the feasibility study, cause ARPA money is getting tight.
Okay.
And I'm already having to make some swaps, and nobody wants to lose their money, and that's kind of the biggest pool of available funds, if anyone was to squirrel away at it.
okay.
So,
So we'll set those up for the next meeting to make, to vote on
yeah,
that
Adam's
and to do
basically
this,
very happy with
right?
me.
Mike,
I see the next agenda item is community statements, and I don't know that we've got any public, other folks here, but Nate, do you know, public could have joined us,
Yeah.
they, via the,
Mhm.
you know, the Zoom feature. How do we check for that now?
I checked for it.
Oh, okay,
When-
so
when
you're
I-
doing,
yeah.
okay, good, that answered the question.
Yeah, and then no one was there.
No one was
Yeah.
there.
And so I turned it off about a half hour in, just to save time.
65.5 is what we had approved, I believe, for the feasibility study.
But we spent 7,
Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
not doing that, it's too late.
58 and some change.
alright.
Next meeting?
Next meeting date is the, November, sorry.
November.
You had proposed that.
November 6th, I think, no,
yeah.
is it the 6th?
I don't, you did have it in your
I did write
email.
3
There
next
is a select board meeting that
dates
night.
down, it is, okay, so that's where I'm
November
having a
6th.
little bit of trouble
So-
sometimes, is because it says every other Monday, but then it also had said the first and third Monday.
Because there are 5 Mondays in
It's the
October, so
13th.
it
Okay.
flips.
Okay, our
It's
next
the
meeting is the
13th.
13th, okay,
Perfect.
so the 13th, Nate, is the next meeting I had down.
Okay,
Is
what
that
time
a
is
s-
that?
Thank you, Mike.
Is that a select board?
6 o'clock,
No.
is that a select
No.
board date? No.
No.
No, but
Okay.
it's a select board for me date, so
Wow.
I can do it, but I would have to tune in on digitally, and I can only give you an hour, cause my meeting starts at 7.
So we'll get those items done right from the get-go for you, right, Heather? You said the first hour.
Does it help if we go
Yeah,
a
I
little
can-
bit earlier, start at 5:30 and say limit it to an hour?
It's getting tougher for me to get here for 5:30.
I gotcha. Yep, well,
Um,
Madam Chair, then your schedule
So-
is going to be a priority.
Whatever everyone wants to do, I mean, like I said, I'll tune in as long as I can,
Sure.
Okay,
but usually about 10 of, I have to get myself to my next seat.
Yes.
okay.
Understood.
All right, and a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to
I have
adjourn.
one final
Oh,
thing.
Oh,
yes.
yep.
At the start of the meeting, I went on the Google Drive, created a meetings folder, saved the previous meetings
Nice.
as Google Docs, and I've been taking tonight's meetings using dictation, converting voice to text.
Nice.
It's
Perfect.
messy,
Right.
but it gets the gist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And that's saved as a Google Doc. As soon as we adjourn, I will close that and the meeting notes will be there.
Excellent.
Great.
Well, Mike had an alibi. Second thing, having been through this process in another life, what I would not caution us about, but make sure, especially for the next time when we're going to be looking at what might be called needs, we have to differentiate between what we want, what we need via site codes and regs, and what we can afford. And if we don't parse it out that way, it's hard to wrap your arms around it. And once again, in a past life, rather than going to a fire chief and a police chief as far as what the needs were, they were dictated to us because we had a very large overarching organization, and so there was a lot more consistency. And then we just quote unquote site adapted based on, I'll just give you an example. It was with the military, and if we had an active runway with fueling facilities there, then the fire chief got some other stuff. He didn't get the Mach 1 fire station. He got something different, and that went to personnel also. Likewise, at a place where there was high security requirements, the police department, they got tailor-made for that particular mission. And the rest of it was sort of general requirements. Everyone got the same size. When I say everyone, you know, both chiefs got the same size office and so on and so forth. And it was pretty bare bones, because we were using taxpayers' dollars as we are here. So I have a lot of confidence in that approach. It's hard, but we save some time. So I don't know if we have that same sort of ability to reach out and get what a standard fire department and police department get. Because based on our site visits, even though Mike said that these A&Es, architect engineers, know their stuff, they know the code, but everything else is sort of kind of general, and you got to watch them, as he even mentioned. I will echo that sentiment, having been down this road before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Last statements, anything? Okay, all right, motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.